If you've been following me on Instagram or really any social media for any amount of time since I've been doing Watercolor Misfit, you've probably noticed that I have a little bit of an addiction when it comes to color mixing. And I mainly do it for two reasons. The first one is basically for de-stressing, especially when I'm struggling with anxiety. And the second reason is because I am a control freak when it comes to my paint colors. I want to know what they're going to do, how they're going to work, and what colors they're going to mix when I mix them with certain supplies that I have. Now, I want to put in a disclaimer right now. Art supplies are very much a personal preference. I've said this in the watercolor paper video. It's very much a personal preference when it comes to the artist. And that is going to be very much true today in what I desire for my particular paints. So the candidates for today's test are 7 different magentas of different pigment types and over different brands. Now, first off, I want to thank all of you for just being so fantastic. I have been trying to find a light fast magenta that I like. And it's been really hard. I've tested different varieties and I just couldn't find one that I liked. So y'all all gave me suggestions, really great suggestions of what I should purchase that are light fast magentas to basically test out. And these are the brands that y'all suggested. So I spent over $80 on these out of my money to test these out, and we'll see how this goes. So these are all different, they're considered magentas, and they're all different pigment kind of hues, which we'll go into a little bit later. So for these particular paints, I have 3 tests that I'm going to be doing to kind of narrow down which paint I feel would work best for me personally and my style. And those tests are going to include a coverage test, a temperature test, and then finally a mixability test. So the very first test that I'm going to be doing is the coverage test, and basically I'm going to be doing this by testing out the values of each of these paints and really paying attention to how these paints are covering the paper. Basically, is it coating it in an even coat of color? And especially, I really want a vibrant layer of color no matter how much water I add to it. When it dries, I want that color to still be vibrant and kind of pop off the page. And another thing that I'm really looking for is that color patchy in any way or granulating? So those are the 3 things that I'm kind of looking for while doing this coverage test. Now, I'm going to be getting into my findings a little bit later, so I'm going to move on to the second test that I did. The second test that I did was the temperature test. So what I'm going to be doing is lining up all of my colors really based on what they look like in the value scale, and line them up based on cool to warm. And the cooler colors would work well with like purples. They're gonna actually appear more purple. And then the warmer colors are actually gonna appear more red. And by lining up my colors in this way, I can actually get a better idea of what magentas would work well when mixing with blues or with reds. So the purple or the cooler magentas are actually gonna work really, really well mixing with blues to make those nice, vibrant purple colors. But those cooler magentas are not gonna mix well with, let's say, yellows. They're gonna create more of your burnt kind of siennas or your kind of reddish browns. But if I get magentas that are more on the warmer side, so those kind of reddish hues, those actually will mix really nicely with my yellows, but they're not necessarily going to mix very well with my blues. They're gonna be more of those earthy kind of purples that you would see, probably more garnet purple colors. You're gonna see more of those when you're mixing the warmer magentas with your blues. Now, as you look at this spectrum of warm to cool, the color that is kind of smack dab in the middle of your spectrum is going to mix well with both the cooler as well as the warmer colors. And for this particular spectrum, since it's magenta, that is where your primary magenta actually would be located, because we want something as dead center as possible to pull out that primary and have it mix both well with our blues and our yellows. So if you've ever been curious as to, let's say, why maybe your magenta or your red kind of color, your reddish magenta, isn't mixing well with, let's say, blue and creating a nice, pretty purple color, it's because it's too warm on the spectrum and needs to be kind of dead in the center. So that is one thing that I'm looking for today. I'm looking for a magenta that would be light fast and work really, really well with basically my yellows and my blues, so a primary magenta. And then I'm also looking for, personally, I just really like this, I like cooler magentas that mix well with purples. So I'm gonna be also looking for a nice cool magenta to work with as well today. And finally, the last test I'm gonna be doing is a mixability test. And for this particular test, I'm basically trying to see which of these colors work well with my current paints, because I don't want to go looking for other paints. I like the ones that I have right now. And another thing that I want to be looking for is, does this work well with my watercolor concentrates? So I'm basically going to be looking for granulation as well as chemical reactions when the paints mix together, either on my palette or on the paper. All right, now that you have a better idea of how I tested these paints, let's talk about my final observations and findings. So out of all the paints that I tested today, my least favorite actually were the Daniel Smith as well as the Schminky Magentas. Both of those did not coat the paper as well as I would like them to, and I was thinking, well, maybe it's because I'm testing on a new type of watercolor paper, which is the Winsor & Newton professional little small journal. That's the particular journal that I was playing around with. And so I basically tried it on different types of paper and I was still getting the same effect. I don't know why I was getting that, but with these two particular paints, I was getting that a lot, this kind of splotchy appearance. So those two were my least favorite of the 7 that I was testing today. Now, the middle of the row, I would say kind of second place ones of all the paints that I did today were, first, the Schminky Ruby Red. This one I actually liked, but it was more on the warm side of what I was looking for temperature-wise, even though pigment-wise is the PV19, the same as basically a lot of the other ones that I tested. It was more on the warmer side compared to the other colors that I was testing. And I already have a really nice red, so I don't really need this, even though it's a nice color. The next kind of second place one that I liked, but I felt like there were other ones that were better, was the Da Vinci Permanent Rose. That one I actually really did like, but it did have some granulation in it when compared to the other two that I'm going to be mentioning later on. So I kind of put this one aside. Now, the next one was actually a very high contender. I actually really liked this color a lot. and that was the M Graham magenta that I was using. And that particular one, I loved it. Like, it was probably my favorite one out of all the ones that I was using today, until I noticed it had mixing problems with my Winsor blue. And I've had that happen a couple of times. I don't know why, but for some reason, sometimes when I'm mixing with just different brands, the paint mixtures will actually start to separate. If anybody can explain to me why that happens, that would be great. Tell me in the comments down below. But I have noticed that happen a couple of times. So if you're mainly using M Graham paints, this color was truly amazing. I really, really liked it. However, since it didn't work well with my current palette, I had to put it aside. And let's talk about my final two favorites, which you probably already figured out based on what I haven't mentioned. So my two final favorites were the Core Magenta. That one just did fantastic with all of the tests that I did. It coated the paper really well. It had a very vibrant color, and it mixed really well with my current colors that I have. That one is more of the cooler side of magenta, so it's going to give me those really nice pop purple colors that I really, really like to mix with my magentas. And it's also going to give me really nice kind of browns, especially like a burnt sienna color if I mix it with some of my yellows. So I really enjoyed this particular color. It worked well with my current paints, and that's the reason why it was in the final standing. And then the last color that I really, really liked painting with was my Winsor Permanent Rose. And this particular one is kind of the middle of the row of that spectrum of colors. So this particular one would work really, really well as a primary magenta color in my color palette. And it's also light fast. So that is my findings for which magentas I actually really liked and which ones I could kind of do without. So lots of love, y'all. I hope you enjoyed this once again, and I'll see you next time. Bye.